We got a special guest today. We got Rob Wayne. And Rob, actually, how would you describe yourself? Because you are a wizard coach that has helped a lot of people in different areas of their life, including wealth, for example, as well as relationships.
At the core of what I do, I help people get like deeply connected with other people. And the way that people find me is through wealth and through relationships. And I think what I help people understand is the connection between those ideas. So, how is it that you can become wealthy? How is it that you can become very good and natural at dating by getting deeply connected with people? And at some level, I think it's how do we deeply understand emotions? Because I think that's mostly how humans make decisions. When the limbic system in the brain is damaged, we can write a pros and cons list about the red ball and the blue ball, and we like the red ball better, but we can't actually pull the trigger. And so when people begin to get that, they begin to understand how important emotions are, then they can begin to do all this other stuff that involves human decision making. So I guess that's the definition for now.
And just for everyone to know what the topic of this video is, it's to help men date authentically. Because we know a lot of you guys are familiar with pickup, dating, game, all that good stuff, red pill, whatever, black pill, however many pills there are nowadays. But this is really about allowing you to, I think at the very core, I'll speak for myself, a lot of guys, they want to have a girl who likes them for who they are, and they want to feel like they're being real, right? They don't want to feel like they have to execute like a 7-step framework, even though that's a good, maybe that's a good way to learn. But they don't want to feel like they need to like really fake it or like really always like push, and always like focus on tactics and strategies. So I know Rob today, the reason why I invited him on is because he's a master at really authentically relating with people and being very good with communication. And I can attest to this personally. So we're here to pick his brain and just dive into his wisdom.
Yeah, this is a very validating introduction.
Pumping you up, man, in terms of like sprucing you up, like, but it's well deserved, like seriously. So
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm stoked to have this conversation too. I was in the pickup thing for I don't know, for about 15 years. Yeah, I agree. I think it has its uses, and I think it's a necessary first step. And just kind of riffing off of what you're saying, what comes to mind for me is it's just a question of like effort and bait in some senses, and I guess I'll explain that. Like with pickup, I think the idea was, hey, I'm not going to be the kind of guy that wins people over by putting out the bait of wealth or status or whatever. I'm going to win them over by like, I have game. They're going to be attracted to my personality in some sense. Because at the end of the day, I don't think any of us wants to be dating someone that's just going to fucking leave our asses as soon as they find someone that's like more wealthy or they got like a shinier car or something, right?
mhm.
And so we learn to filter out those women and we run game. But I think then there's this thing that happens with game where, it is possible to get like reasonably good with women and with people on some degree, but it's very effortful. Um, I have to put on this persona or this mask of who I am. And I think from what I remember back in the day, it was be higher energy, be very witty, have a one liner ready to deliver, be ready to tease, push, pull. So there's all these mechanics, mirroring, and that's all fine. It works, right? But it's also like, hey, I'm now donning this mask that I have to continue to wear because that's the bait that I put out.
Mhm.
And when that mask dissipates, when I get comfortable around this person and the real me comes out, that's going to be less attractive. They were attracted to the mask that I had on. Now here's a different person, and that I think is the breakdown in game that first comes to mind. It works, but at a certain point, it becomes this weird, hollow. Uh, I want to say effortful again, but I've been saying that a lot. So just
It's
like
been your
a
buzzword lately in your coaching calls, effortful.
yeah, it's just like it's a very high energy investment thing. Yeah, but that's where my head went with it.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I mean, I'm gonna be honest too. Like for me right now, I'm struggling overall. Namely, I mean, I went through some shit in 2020. Won't go into that right now. But I mean, I've been around the block too in terms of like I worked for one of the biggest dating companies, which I won't name because I actually don't even know if I'm legally allowed to do that, or if they made me sign a contract of like you can't compete with us X amount of years. I think it was 6 years, so it's probably past then. But anyways, one of the biggest dating companies at the time, and I knew all the theories, right? And it was predicated on showing higher value, which I don't think is a I think that's actually maybe necessary for, let's say, Instagram and like online dating in a sense. But it was predicated on that, and they had this like emotional progression model. And for the OGs that really know like pickup and stuff, you'll probably recognize that term. But it was like this emotional and like different progression models. It was very like consulting, like right where you have these little charts and a little pyramid and all this stuff. It was great for analytical guys like myself. But I really tried hard at it, and I would get sidetracked by things in life, like building my career, focusing on my body, and all this other stuff. But my results kind of sucked, and I feel like my dating journey has been up and down because when I was 26, which was 6 years ago, I feel like I hit my peak. Like online dating was not as competitive because it was still like it wasn't in its mature phase as it is now. And I was getting a lot of matches, so I felt like I was decently good. And then I got a girlfriend for like 3 years, and then I got back on the dating market 2 years ago. And I'm like, dude, this is difficult. Like, I'm going out there. I'm not the type to like. I was like, I'm not gonna really do game. Like, I'm not against self improvement, right? But I'm not gonna do the whole technical like let's show higher value or any sort of thing like that, right? And now I'm at a point where I personally feel a little bit lost in the sense of like, but what actually works? Because even the whole like vulnerability thing, like the Mark Manson, like I think it was great for connecting with people in general. And I think I realize people are more open than you think they are, or allows them to see the humanity in you. But it's not like that was the key to opening the dating floodgates for me. It was, if anything, it was more just like, thank you for sharing that, but that hot spiritual girl at the yoga class, right? She still didn't want me or anything, right? So, anyways, I'm coming from that headspace, but I guess for you, like, how did you get to the point where you could really like show who you are, be authentic, and also get the results that you want? Because I think for me and maybe other guys, they're like, well, if I do that or I try doing that, I still get no results. And even though I don't want to focus on the results, you can only spend so many days being by yourself or not having those romantic connections.
Yeah, I resonate with that. And I think to speak directly to that point first and then to go back into some backstory, I think the breakdown with vulnerability in pure vulnerability is that it creates a lot of safety, which is really important. It's a great foundation. I can get very connected with a human being, and that maximizes my chances in a lot of ways. But I guess if I tie it back to the old school pickup analogy, it's essentially just me building massive, massive comfort.
Hmm.
And if I'm also not doing anything to create attraction, then that interaction doesn't move forward. And what I mean by that is what I personally rely on right now is the theory of emotional contagion, not in a manipulative sense, but like in that if I feel aroused and then I start talking about what it is about her that's arousing for me after I have that connection. So first I establish deep, deep connection. Then I have the ability to go and talk about like what is it about what she's doing that's cute, exciting, attractive, sexy for me. I think that's like the lowest level, easiest, biggest return on investment level of flirting. It doesn't have to be me like finding a reason to start talking about sex or like spitting out innuendo or like one of the things that I have female friends complaining to me a lot about is like guys will be like, hey, I just got back from the gym, and then they'll use that as a transition into sending a shirtless selfie, hoping that that will sexualize the interaction. And
Yeah.
we've all done that. I mean, it's I'm a little ashamed of having done that.
I'm
um,
looking at my messages. Did I do that recently? I definitely haven't done it in the past day at the very least. But by the way, I did just get back from the gym running. No one, I definitely am not sending a shirtless photo to anybody right now, though, because I'm just like, I just feel like a sweaty mess. Anyways, but I get it, right? Like, there's that on your point. I can see how guys try very hard, and just to let you continue with your thread of thought. So keep interrupting.
Well, I mean, that's a good interruption. It's helping me remember why I even brought it up. But it's like, it comes back to emotions again. If I'm comfortable being sexual, then I'll be okay with sexual self expression and feeling aroused around women. And I think for me, the default for a long time was feeling ashamed of being attracted to specific women. That's why attractive women were really intimidating for me. And I had to do some inner work around that. But once I became okay with that, um, part of that process is I allow myself to feel attracted and aroused. Emotional contagion happens. That person has mirror neurons, so they experience that arousal and then they also feel arousal. And because there's a space of safety, they're allowed to. And now all of a sudden there is attraction. And it's very, very easy from there. It's super straightforward. The other thing that showed up for me, and I'm going to say this and then get into some backstory. The other thing that showed up for me, if you're listening right now, was you might notice that there's a certain level of women that you think of as your peers, and you might do this unconsciously. So there are people that you see on the streets, and you're unconsciously just kind of giving them the nod, right? You connect with them, like these are the people. What I started noticing was that if I was too attracted to this a certain level of woman, then I would avoid eye contact. I would actually walk out of her path, and essentially just a level of self sabotage. This is not my peer group. I don't belong. And then I wouldn't have the ability to talk to this person. So so much of this is, what are my personal limiting beliefs? What patterns are happening? How do I catch them and interrupt them? And I think this is kind of like a four-letter word, especially with men and with me. So much of this comes down to self-love, self-acceptance, right? And if I don't accept me as a high-level guy, as someone who deserves to be attracted to someone who's very attracted to me, then I will essentially self-sabotage every single time I find someone that is a 9 or a 10 to me. And I think that 9 or a 10 thing is arbitrary and relative. It varies from person to person. So that was also a helpful thing, like understanding, well, not everyone thinks this person's a 10. It's just me. Someone else might think she's a 5. And that's cool. Like, but that kind of takes the pressure off. I quit a job working with big brands doing market research like Hulu, Disney, ESPN. I think there was but a shitload of household brands, very, very high status, very much like, oh, I should be doing this thing.
Mhm.
I was dating multiple people at that time, and I was finding that life was very, very empty, and also I was burning out at the same time. So I got an offer to work with what was then the number one dating coach in the world to do his marketing. And I thought maybe this will solve some things. I'll talk to him. I'll get my game dialed in. I'll be happier. I'm moving to Austin, Texas. That's up and coming, very young town. Heard good things. And then I got there and I fell into the worst depression of my life. I was Man, some days I didn't even eat. I didn't even shower. I think the only thing that might have kept me going was the fact that I had two cats that traveled cross country with me. They drove with me 19 hours, and I love those cats. And some days I'd just be in bed all day, just like watching porn or YouTube or on Facebook or Instagram, and I would just get up to feed them, and then I'd go back to do that thing. And it wasn't that I didn't have game. I was very capable of attracting women. It was just that somehow, even though I was successful across every area that I was supposed to be successful in, uh, life was still fucking really empty.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm gonna hit pause there and just leave space in case anything's coming up.
As human beings, we have that hedonic adaptation where once we hit a certain level, it gives a little bit of happiness, but it's not the end all be all. And I also know, like, to reflect. I'm also thinking, I think I'm trying to come from a place of someone that's more of a, I don't want to say beginner, but someone who is struggling. And they might say, like, well, that's great and all, but, I still want to experience what it's like to have everything, to like be able to date multiple people, to have that cushy job, to be in a really cool place. And then they're just like, they want that, right? And they might not be able to really relate because I guess they're still in that starvation mode, which I understand, right? Like they really want something. But on your point, I also do understand what it's like because I've also experienced something pretty similar where I'm like, wow, I actually didn't know I was depressed. It wasn't necessarily at the same color of your type of depression of like, I didn't want to do anything and just laid in bed all day because it can manifest in different ways per person. But I was just like, I was very nihilistic, right? I'm like, what's the point of life? We're on the rat race. We're gonna die one day. Nothing's gonna matter. And I'm just like, why do I feel this way? Like, why? Why does life feel so pointless?
So I guess where it started was someone like a hot girl convinced me to, to join the Landmark Forum.
Mhm.
And the Landmark Forum is great, but it doesn't specifically teach this breakthrough. It was just something that I observed while I was there.
Sure.
Um, but when you're there, there's the experience of like you're there in front of like 120 people, and they're all sharing like some deep shit that they would never tell anyone else. And so it's a really great environment to begin to learn vulnerability. But one of the things that I saw was the minute that I began talking about the stuff that I was really not okay with sharing anywhere else. Um, all of a sudden it was like, oh shit, like this is what I was waiting for this entire time. This was the thing that I was hoping to get at a game. All of a sudden people are vibing with me, we're resonating with each other. It
Mhm.
feels like a once in a lifetime connection.
Yeah.
And that was really important to recognize. The other piece that was important to recognize was this concept of radical responsibility. Everything that shows up in my reality is something that I fucking created. Some other people might have contributed, but I have the ability to look at my life and see, hey, I don't like this thing, and I made this thing. Now, I think it's really important to understand that this is not like a self blame thing. And I know you know this, Jeremy, but if you're listening right now, this is not about like beating yourself up until you want to cry or kill yourself. It's more about if you can be responsible for what's in your life right now, understand every decision that I made led to me being here right now in this lifestyle that I'm living, in this apartment, in this house, dating the people that I'm dating, my job, everything, my body. Then I can also accept that I created this, which means that I can change this. And that's one of the most powerful mindsets that you can ever adopt. From there, I think a few things needed to happen in order to get from that point to where I am now. But one of them was understanding that whatever I thought was the magic bullet, um, and sometimes it was game. I just need to figure out online dating. Sometimes it was the next level of business. I need to make $10,000 this month. Um, every time I achieved the next level, I found myself back in that same place of depression. It was like, fuck, this sucks. I'm here, I'm at the next level, and it's still the same. And gradually over time, I began to realize, well, the reason why it's the same is because I haven't changed really. I haven't changed my relationship with myself. Um, and so as I began exploring that space, one of the things that I noticed was I, in order to avoid spending time alone in stillness with myself, um, I distract myself with progression, with advancement. I need those things. And if a relationship isn't advancing, it feels terrible to me. If my life, my career isn't advancing, I'm not cool with that. And if I'm always looking to advance, I had to stop and ask myself if I'm always looking to advance and if I'm not making it progression in my life, then I feel like a loser or like a piece of shit or there's something wrong. Then am I going to be chasing this thing forever? And I think the answer became a very obvious yes for me. So now I lack the ability to be happy with my own context. And this is really important because if I am not able to be happy around me, around myself, then my general level of happiness is very low. If we link that back to the idea of emotional contagion, then how I feel is how other people begin to feel around me.
Mhm.
It's actually reverse charisma. So they've done studies on charisma, right? And so what they found is that people who feel positively around you will like you more, obviously.
Yep.
So charisma then can be defined by I consistently make people feel better when they're around me. One of the easiest ways for me to do that is to become a happier person. But at first, I must identify what it is that I'm doing in my own life, the way that I'm thinking about life, that is having me be a miserable fuck. Because
Yeah.
when I address those things, my overall level of happiness raises. And then people around me get to be happier, and that is charisma. And it's very, very simple on paper, I think. So I'm going to hit pause there because that's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think stops people from actually just letting themselves be happy and allow that emotional contagion to really take root with the women they interact with? Because I'm thinking from someone, and this also is coming from my experience, for someone that is usually in this, they're very analytical, right? And we're talking about Asian guys too, we're doubly analytical. Now I'm just generalizing, I'm just saying shit, right? But it's kind of like I've had friends, and I'm also guilty of this, where they're like, I'm going to keep a spreadsheet of my approaches, or just like kind of like analyzing things. And there's actually more recently, I saw a coach that promoted this, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, right? But I understand the approach, right? It's very analytical, see what went wrong, and you do this. People do this in business too, right? You need like a analytics to see what's going on. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of these guys and myself, we did come across the whole like what you feel, she feels, and it seems like you were able to find the zen of realizing how as you said, ridiculously easily can't speak English. We're gonna just start speaking Mandarin, man. How easy it was to actually, really connect with beautiful women or women that you found very attractive. And what do you think stops a lot of these guys? I mean, we've both done the landmark forum, and we know it's like a blind spot and all that stuff. But why do you think a lot of guys may hear this concept of like more? I don't want to call it natural game, but really something more authentic, yet they still rely on tactics, strategies, or like this route of like it's going to be really hard, and you have to put in like your 10,000 hours of interacting with women.
I mean, I think there are a lot of answers to that question, and it may just vary from person to person. But from what I've seen in myself, the first thing that really fucks me over when I don't catch it is a sense of urgency.
Mm,
I
uh,
need this woman to respond to me in a positive way. I need her to send me a sexy photo. I need her to get on a call with me. Otherwise, she's going to lose interest and then fucking leave. I need her to show up on this date. And and one of the things that I started to recognize recently, because I just started taking on online game again and it's dominating now. But before, it was like, this is fucking embarrassing. I'm a dating coach and I suck at this. Why?
yeah,
And it was this, man. Like, and what I saw was with us, with I'm going to generalize. Like for a lot of dudes, attraction is very physical. It's visceral. I see a girl, she's hot. I want to have sex with her. Done, right? And I found myself making the assumption that if someone matched with me, she was on the same wavelength. And it's funny because female attraction doesn't really work that way. I'm going to generalize again. So what they've found is that it's like women prefer a slow build. They like anticipation. Why are romance novels like 500 pages long or 200 instead of like 10 pages of just fucking, right? It's we jump to the fucking. They like the anticipation and build. So why am I trying to run dating and flirting in this urgent, gotta get to sex kind of way? One, I'm making sex into this magic bullet thing where it's all of my fantasies come to life. Like she wants to be spanked and she's gonna come from spanking or tied up or whatever, and she's gonna invite over her hot friend, and that's gonna make me feel really good. That's not how sex goes. Like usually it's not as great as I picture it in my head. So there's urgency there. I think it's a magic bullet. It will solve my problems, make me feel better. And so that makes me needier. And I'm chasing. And I'm also not taking on dating from the perspective that works for women. They want to be romanced and seduced over time. And so she's not responding after 2 days. Fine. Like that that's the speed that she wants to play the game. And me trying to force a different result was the thing that had me show up even needier and weirder than ever before. And the minute that I let go of that, I was talking with like 4 or 5 women at that time. Every single one of them gave me their numbers and wants to go on dates with me. But before that, it was just like weird, janky results. And I think that's like a huge chunk of what was keeping me stuck.
Yeah, I think the thing that resonates with me in what you said is like there's that urgency, and that urgency can come from different sources. One could be the urgency of results, like I need this result now, or it's I haven't connected physically with a woman in so long, I need the results now, which I understand because we're all dudes and we know the urge, man. Like we know the urge. And there's another urgency actually I noticed about myself. It was like trying to make the urgency of applying a coach's advice and having it work for me. Now, this is definitely self inflicted, right? But there was one thing that I applied, and maybe when I edit this video, I'll throw in the screenshots, where I was able to turn things like sexual really quickly. And it got to the point where it basically went in like within a few messages, it would go into like full BDSM mode. And then I would also see like coaches and people applying these, I wouldn't say routines, but just like this framework, right? Where they would be able to get, like one night stands from it. And I was like, well, I kind of want to make it work. Well, what would end up happening for me, anyways, is it would get very hot and heavy, but then the girl would ghost, right? So I would set the date, and more often than not, she would ghost or she wouldn't like actually confirm the date, and things would just drop off. So, anyways, like I know some guys might say like, well, you need to post your screenshots and then we'll have someone critique it, which I understand. It could actually just be tweaking a few things, but it also I'm just relating that because there was also that desire for making things work a certain way. And even one of my friends said that when we were in Croatia and he was seeing the text messages, he was actually getting better results than I was. Not in Croatia, but just like he's also in LA. And his messages are not the least bit like sexual at all. And it was almost just like fun, flirtatious, but it's very light, right? And it was like, hey, let's hang out. And he's saying like, well, if you're trying so hard to make it work, maybe you just got to scale it back, or like find like a happy medium in between expressing your desire, but also not trying too hard, which I really agreed with, even though I didn't want to necessarily say I want to like, I still wanted to make the original method work, right? And yeah, I resonate with that because, I think us guys, for myself too, like I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I know a lot of us Asian guys too. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves. I'm sure if I post this video and people of different races comment in, they're like, yeah, we also put a lot of pressure, blah, blah, which is true. But it definitely doesn't help when I think it comes to just like your sanity. It didn't help when it came to my sanity, but also even getting results because I was just like, man, I fucking suck. And I've been in this for like so many years. So I definitely feel those vibes. And it's very cool to hear how you were able to just really understand your beliefs, where was that pressure coming from, and also how it's tied to your results and be able to release it, but also still get results. So I'm guessing the thing I'm trying to think of someone in this position where they're like, okay, I understand I shouldn't be trying too hard to gain girls through text messages and stuff, but oftentimes I think a lot of guys, including myself, when we hear more of this deep advice, which is true, they're like, but how do I apply it? Because if I just scale things back, things become boring and the girls flick. So I think guys are confused, right? Like they like it theoretically, what you're presenting, but also when it comes to practically how to apply it, it's a big question mark.
Yeah, I think this is an important part to create a distinction too, because I used to assume that women were flaking if they didn't respond to me after a couple days or whatever. Or but one thing that's been useful for me is thinking about this, like how many women has or how many men has this woman dated? Probably 10 to 15 times the number of women that I've dated. By now, do I think that she's got a really good understanding of what works for her and what doesn't? I have to. I have to assume that she's really dialed in on what actually she wants in terms of a relationship or dating or sex or whatever. So, if she says no, then I'm also going to trust that she's making the right decision. Because, and maybe this is just a me thing, but I refuse to date women that I'm not emotionally attracted to as well. Like, if she's just a horrible fucking person and like, I don't believe in any of the shit that she believes in. Um, then I'm just not going to want to have sex with her or go on a date with her. And if she's put off by my personality or how I show up, I the frame that I take that allows me to stop being needy is just like, cool. Like, I don't want to date someone that I have to actively wrestle into the boat like a flopping fish or whatever. Like if I have to fight in order to get her to spend time with me, how do I think that relationship is going to go? What about date number two? Am I gonna have to like go to war in order to get her to show up for tea or something? Like fucking no! I have time for other things. Like I need that energy for building businesses and dating other women. Like and and all of this is like I get it, right? Like if I haven't been laid in like a few months, then there's this urgency and a need to make this dating work. But there's also this level of like scarcity. I'm just assuming that this is the only person, right? This person matched with me. I'm not getting great results. I guess maybe the question becomes, how do we deal with that scarcity other than mindset stuff? So the most practical, basic advice that I can give is hire a professional photographer, have them take a bunch of shots of you in different outdoor locales, and make sure that you're not wearing sunglasses. Smile, because I think online we as men are like really taught to like be like hardcore and like serious and stoic, right? That's valuable as guys. How good is your poker face, bro? And
Like, do you even lift? Like, unless your fucking trapezius muscles are shooting out of your turtleneck or something, right? It's like you don't even lift, bro. It's crazy, man. Like, it's a quick interjection is what guys think is attractive. Unless you're really experienced with dating, like online dating, chances are those photos suck. Like, I hate to be real about it. Like, they suck. Or like, women notice different things, man. Like, I did videos on this, but I hired women from Fiverr to review my photos and give feedback, and they notice the weirdest things. Like I never noticed it, but for dudes who are like, no, like my biceps look really great in this one, and like, I'm flexing so hard, I can, like I can't. You know how like you can tell guys like really flexing. He's just like, look at me holding my phone, like a vein running down, and it's just like, okay, okay, like, but we know what you're doing, but for guys, we're like, well, she would see the muscles, and like in our mind, I think we think she's gonna be, oh my goodness, he's so ripped. Let me like just take my panties off. But for girls, like try hard, trying too hard. Like the background's dirty. Is that 24-hour fitness? Disgusting, right? Like so yeah. On your point, yeah, you guys make a lot of mistakes, but I'll let you continue with what you notice.
no, that's fucking perfect. That's exactly where I was going with this, right? Most guys, especially when we start off, the standards that we hold ourselves to is what is attractive to guys.
Sure.
And yeah, like so that's cool if I want to impress another bro at the gym, but like I'm here to attract like hot women presumably. I assume that's why people are listening to this. So then we need we need hot women to rate those things. Then either way, whatever it is that you're gunning for, I think it's valuable to take some time, get that professional photo, go onto Photo Feeler, and then get that shit rated. Um, so Photo Feeler will rate your photos based off of how attractive you are, how intelligent you look, and I think there's also trustworthiness, which are all really important. And then you can select the demographic and the gender of the people that you're interested in dating, and then those people will leave you feedback on how attractive you are. And what most guys don't get, and what I didn't get, was that attraction is extremely variable. And if the only thing they have of you is a single snapshot, you better fucking make sure that snapshot is really good. So if your photo lands in the top 10% across those three categories, use that in your dating profile. Don't use anything else. Then you'll get more matches, then you'll have abundance, and the circle will be complete.
Yeah, it's interesting on the photo filler thing. I use it recently. I basically hoard out my spending recently with online dating because after I came back from Europe, I was like, I got these good shots. Let me really validate this. Let's hire girls on Fiverr, ask girlfriends, use photo feeler. This is just more of a side tangent. It's funny because there's different photos where for dating, I ranked very highly in all the categories: smart, trustworthy, attractive. And there's one where it's like you don't look too smart, but you look very trustworthy and attractive. And it just makes me laugh because it's like my hot and dumb photo. It's like he's a hot dude, but he's dumb. I'm like, come on, guys. Like I got other photos that show that I'm clearly smart, but it's just funny, like just I think guys we're really bad at analyzing photos. And in general, unless like you're like a dating coach or you have a lot of experience, with women and seeing their perspective, most guys they cannot pick it for shit. Like they really need help. And it's okay because we're not, your bros are probably going to pick the photos where they think you look cool or have the biggest muscles or whatever it may be. But really, women look for different things.
Yeah, but can we rewind and talk about what was in your hot and dumb photo so I
Yeah,
can feel if it's
let me actually share my screen. I've been trying to like do videos where it's more interactive. Let
all
me
right.
actually hide my porn right now. My I'm not gonna make a really bad joke. Actually, I don't have porn on right now for the people that are easily offended.
Disappointing at the very least.
I know, right? It's on my phone actually, but it's not on my computer. It's my work computer. My goodness, why would I do that? Use my personal data in my phone. Shoot. Okay. Anyways, let's find the hot but dumb photo. Not too bad. Are you able to see my screen, the photo feeler screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is an example. This is the website that Rob was referring to, where you can get rated. You'll see I spent a fair amount of votes or credits to get voted. I mean, it's not like I'm too dumb, right? But over here, I'm 7.0, but like the attractiveness is pretty high. But over
Yeah.
here, with like the suit photo, right, the headshot, I rate highly on the trustworthy and attractive, but also smart. So I guess the more active picture over here was more like you look good, but you may not be that smart. Over here, this was just actually I thought this photo was good, but overall it was rated pretty low in terms of being smart, trustworthy, and attractiveness is so. So it's just interesting. I'm the same person, obviously, in every single photo. I'm not like a secret lizard person, but your photos really do matter. And if you don't choose the right ones, it might really just be shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, even looking at that photo, like I can't tell why they would assume that you're less smart in that particular shot. And I think that probably just speaks to the point that we've been making here again and again, and that hey, you probably don't know what picture of yours is attractive, and if you get it rated, you'll be able to figure that out real quick. I mean, this is all mindset again, guys. So sorry, but but it's like okay. So, in order for safety to be present, I have to ask myself first, what would have me feel comfortable sharing some deep, dark shit with another person? And the
Mhm.
first thing that comes to mind is this person isn't judging me for bringing that stuff up. So, if you find yourself secretly judging people for talking about stuff, like maybe she yelled at her mom or whatever, and you're like, "Whoa, this person's a shitty person," emotional contagion. She's going to feel your judgment even if you're not saying anything in your
Yeah.
tonality, the way that you're looking at her, the way you're carrying yourself. And that's not going to go over well. So I think that a big part of this process is identifying what is triggering for me and learning how to resolve that triggering first. It's all like deep emotional work. The
Mhm.
other, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay. So for safety, I think the other thing that's there is like the moment that I can take leadership on vulnerability and share stuff that is emotional with her, um, then then that kind of opens up the door for her to like treat the space like it's safe as well. So you don't necessarily have to be like perfectly calibrated on either of these two things. Again, none of this is about perfectionism, and I would say that's kind of one of the big things that really holds us back in dating as like Asian guys. Um, but man, I just lost my point. Oh man, that's funny. All right. I think another piece of it too is like don't take yourself too fucking seriously. Allow yourself to make mistakes, just like now. Like it'll happen, and if you're cool with looking like an idiot, then I think that creates even more safety as well. Because then she's allowed to make mistakes. She's allowed to be human around you too. And so all these things can kind of combine, but you can sort of see that they're all little pieces of the same puzzle. It's a bunch of little things that build together to create that sense of safety. Um, so hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm thinking for a guy who's all like, well, actually, Rob, I know what you're talking about. It's just a variation of comfort to use the game pickup stuff. and they say like, well, I keep getting friend zoned, so I'm clearly very good at getting girls to open up about their lives. But at the end of the day, she always hits me with, I think we're better as friends text. So I know earlier you mentioned like there has to be that container of feeling safe around you and not feeling like she's gonna be judged. At the same time, you need to have that attraction. I don't want to say like you need to create attraction, but you have to like still have that dance with like there's got to be like comfort, but also attraction. So for the guy who's like one Mister like I'm Mister, she's gonna cry on my shoulder, but she doesn't want me like sexually. How do you give them advice, or like what advice would you give them in terms of not only being able to continue connecting with women, but also to really allow that guy and the woman he's with to explore more of a romantic connection.
Yeah. This is where I used to fuck it up a lot. This is where a lot of guys fuck it up when they come to me. This is like the difference between telling someone a joke and trying to make them laugh versus
Mhm.
just talking about something that I think is fucking hilarious. So when I tell the joke, I'm really trying hard, right? I'm trying to anticipate what this person wants, and on some level, I'm people pleasing in order to get an intended result. I'm very attached. What works better is actually looking. Am I flirting with this person because, or am I interacting with this person because I'm genuinely attracted, or am I interacting with them because I think that I should be? Like she's like a generic hot girl or whatever. Because a lot of the times we, I shouldn't speak for everyone. A lot of the times I would catch myself approaching a girl because I thought that I should. Not because that she'd done anything that had earned my attention that I thought was actually great in terms of, hey, that makes her really hot. Her behavior makes her a really great person. These are things that I enjoy about her. Rather, it was like, oh, she looks like she could be on the cover of some magazine. I should probably go talk to her because I've been studying pickup and seduction for 10 years or whatever. I've read 80 books on game and psychology or human sexuality. And so that expectation is actually inauthentic. And when I'm coming from a place of inauthenticity, I don't actually have emotions because I'm just faking it the entire time. Has this girl actually earned my attraction? And if she has, then am I actually talking about it? So, one of the things that comes up for me is when I'm attracted to someone and she's turning me on, I will just say stuff like, hey, this is really making me want to like kiss your neck right now. After I've established safety and emotional connection, it's safe for me to start sexualizing things, but I'm not doing it with the expectation that she's going to come back and throw her panties in my face or whatever. I'm just doing it because that's what's showing up for me. And when I do that, like 100% of the time, she responds positively. She's like, oh, I'd really like that. Boom, now it's sexualized. Now I can talk about anything that I want to. I can literally take this to a place where we're banging in her own head. And then when I meet up with her, the expectation is that we're going to have sex. Now, none of this is done in a manipulative way, and if you play it that way, it's going to be the same thing. You're putting on a mask, you're being inauthentic. It's going to fucking blow up in your face. She's going to think you're creepy. It's going to be weird for you too. But if you can come from a place of, hey, this person authentically turns me on, I can feel it in my body, right? Rather than I'm obligated to do this because if I don't, I'm a fucking failure and a loser. That's the difference. At least for me, that's what made the hugest difference.
Yeah, it seems what you said reminds me a lot of. On one hand, it's like there was one time years ago I had a dating coach. It was this very attractive woman, but the great thing about it was like you could practice hitting on her, and she'd give you feedback from a woman's perspective. And a lot of it was about really feeling. It was basically emotional contagion. I would say it was about like what you feel, but also being detached from the outcome. Now, I still have a lot of work to do because I could practice it great with her because I'm like, this is just practice and I can totally just fuck up, right? But when it came push to shove, like out in the real world, I was like, oh, I still find myself almost like trying to rely back on like strategies. But anyways, the other thing it reminded me of is like talking with one of our mutual friends. He was doing this thing called Om, like orgasmic meditation. And yeah, and a lot of it was about he was telling me about his first session and how a lot of it and we talked about one of their core tenets, and I might be completely bastardizing what they teach, but one of their so if there's someone that's from like Ohm or all about that in this group, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna fuck it up, just warning you guys. A big tenet was about self-expression, but without like attachment. So there's times if you want to ask a girl to practice that type of meditation with you, which there is like a physical aspect and potentially sexual aspect behind it. Like you ask her, but even if she says no, you have to say like thank you. And the whole point is to really not only in the practice, but even in your interactions, it's to learn how to speak your desire and express it, but be non-attached. And I think a lot of guys, that's really hard too, because again, it comes from a place where, like myself, I always felt like I was coming from a place of scarcity. So I was like, well, I can act like I don't care about the income. I was gonna say I don't care about the income. I don't care about the outcome. Yeah, that's where my head is at apparently. Um, but I can act like I don't care about the outcome, but the reality is like, it's hard energetically because they're trying to like manage the energy. But at the same time, there's the energy of like desiring the woman, but also like the mental energy of like being too up in your head of like, oh, I need to do X, Y, Z. Like, and then it's like, get out of your head, or like, I need to get out of my head. Then for me, I put a lot of pressure on myself. So I would go in those mental spirals. And it definitely is a practice. So on that note, you made a very clear distinction of being able to connect with a woman and feel that honest desire, not forcing it, right? Um, were there any practices that really helped you, whether it was meditation or any other sort of like, let's say, spiritual, meditative, personal development practices that really helped you get to that point of like really being comfortable expressing yourself? Because I think a lot of guys, it's one of those things where they might be like, oh, like that makes sense in theory, but when push comes to shove, I still find myself locking up or getting in my head.
Yeah, I'm glad that we came back to that because I have a lot to comment on that. There are a ton of practices that would be beneficial, but what you were just speaking about is really important. So self-expression. I think I think the reason why, and I'm going to give you an example about this in a little bit, but I think the reason why self-expression is important is because it is allowing us to play a different game. Rather than focusing on, hey, am I doing this right? Is she attracted to me? Is she giving me the right indicators of interest? What's her body language saying? Is she mirroring me properly? How's her eye contact doing? Did I make her laugh enough? Is she attracted enough? Should I sexualize more? All that shit is distracting us from the moment here and now where I'm interacting with another human being. And that's where disaster happens, right? I'm so deep in strategy that I'm not paying attention to what's actually occurring. I'm missing cues that she's giving me because I'm hyper analyzing. When I move over to self expression, I'm getting out of my own head into actually just like what would feel good for me to do right now. What would I like to do? What's popping up in my own head? And it's beginning, and I think, and I ironically and kind of painfully, the only way to get better at self expression is to try self expression and just take the dive. um, Kind of reminds me of when I started rock climbing. It's like, how do I get better at this shit? Every single person I talk to, just climb more. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to take a leap of faith and just tell her about the time that you peed your pants in elementary school right off the bat. Like, self expression doesn't have to be spilling your guts about shit that she doesn't need to know about that's not relevant to the conversation just because it's vulnerable. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
But it could be like, oh, I think it would be awkward to talk about how um, hmm, I'm really attracted to you and I'm having a hard time coming up with the next thing to say. Like, and I noticed that there's a part of me that wants to impress you and be witty. And if I say that, is she going to be okay with that? And over time, I think what we begin to find is that there's more and more play. There's more wiggle room than we think. And as you express more pieces of yourself, it begins to build your confidence as well. Oh shit, I can trust my intuition about what I say next. I can trust my own brain about what it wants to deliver. People actually like me when I operate in this way, or when I talk about what I'm feeling. Over time, it allows for this mode of operation where you can go into any social interaction, trust that you'll be able to fall back onto whatever your brain has to offer and be like, I'm just going to spout whatever nonsense bullshit it wants to say right now, and it's going to be fine. In fact, it's going to be better than fine. It's going to be the perfect interaction for me. And that builds up over time. So at first, it might be just had a dumb thought pop up in my head. I just blew a spit bubble. I have no idea where to take this conversation next. Um, and it like something that happens for me initially when I'm having a really nervous reaction with people is like have like an accent Tourette. So all of a sudden I'll be talking with a weird accent, and I'll just call it out. Fucking okay, yeah, I just had a moment of of this. And being willing to poke fun at where we make our own mistakes is part of self-expression as well. I think that humanizes us. I think that generates connection. So we do it in small layers. You baby step it at first. And then over time, as you accept yourself more and more, as you get more reference, experience, and data, as you see, oh, being me isn't so bad. Actually, women are attracted to that. Then then you have perfect social freedom. Then you really are unstoppable. But really, it kind of just starts with a willingness to not let the fear be the thing that stops you from giving it a shot.
What advice would you give to guys to really move beyond that fear and all those considerations? Because you mentioned the whole, like, baby steps, which I think is very powerful. But is there any other insight or anything else that really helped you in terms of really being able to move past, stifling yourself and like letting fear control your self expression?
Yeah. And I love that this is coming up because it really underscores the sense that all of this, every single part of dating and human interaction, continues to come back to emotions. And to your question, so how do we deal with fear then? One of the things that's been really helpful for me is understanding that I don't know shit about shit. Um, Everything that I believe is just my facet of the truth, and that might just be complete bullshit as well. But the reason why this is helpful for me is because consider that my model of how things will go when I talk to that girl is my assumptions about how good it will be if I get to date her or have sex with her or like hold her in my arms. All of that is based off of my projection of the world. And if I don't know shit about shit, then the odds are my projection about how good that interaction is going to be is probably going to be wrong. And the urgency that I think I feel when I have that when I see someone very attractive to me walking by is like, oh shit, I'm missing out on a golden opportunity. Well, no, you're probably not. Odds are it's going to be worse than you thought, and it's going to be worse than I thought. It's not going to be as bad as I think either, because I can't. If I go back into human biology, right, and I look, what is it that I'm actually perceiving right now? What makes up my reality? Well, actually, it's my brain fucking hallucinating. Every single one of my senses. It's an approximation. It's designed to sort of get a piece of reality and relay it back to me, but it's filtered through my nerve endings. It's interpreted, its data is lost as it travels up to my brain, then it's processed 4 or 5 times, right? If I go into the visual cortex of the brain, if I see something, it goes through V1 through V6. So it's like me taking a picture of something and applying 6 Instagram filters on it before I get to see it. How representative of reality is that? In fact, eyes can only see like 0.3% of the visible spectrum or whatever. So, like, my grasp on reality is based off of nothing. And that's how I form my impressions about the world, right? That's where I get my data from. That's where my facts are. So if I can really accept that my reality is fucking it's an illusion. When I can accept that, then the urgency of, well, I need to talk to her because it's going to be fucking fantastic is gone. When the urgency is gone, the fear is gone too, because I'm not really missing out on much. In fact, I might not even like her. So let me go talk to her and see how this goes. Fear dressed.
I would say, just to relate to the audience members, I've done a lot of personal development, and every course, any sort of like seminar promises to change your life. I will say Landmark was the only one out of all the self development that I've taken. I'm not saying the other ones weren't helpful, but I would say Landmark was the most powerful when it came to letting go of the past, being more emotionally free, or letting go of all the things that I held against other people. Because man, I was like, I'm digressing now, but man, I was really angry at my parents, especially my mom and dad, especially my mom. But I think for a lot of Asian people, we grow up with complicated relationships with their parents, also like body and self-image issues, being an Asian guy growing up in America or in the West. But I would highly recommend Landmark, and I think there's a lot of things that can carry over into how you relate with women. And letting go of your fear is very, very, very powerful when it comes to that. Is there anything else that you think we should cover that you think would be very helpful for a guy that wants to date more authentically in a more natural, honest way that we haven't covered yet, or you think is like an important point that we should go over?
Yeah, and you're all gonna fucking hate me for this. But it's speaking to something that you just brought up. Our core relationship with our parents or with our siblings, if those are fucked up, they begin to replay into our relationships. We fall into the same pattern. So if you're always fighting with your mom because she feels too controlling, well, if you look at your past relationships, you might notice that all of them ended for the same reason. There's this really, really powerful exercise that comes up in the book Attached, which talks about how people are attached, how they deal with conflict, how they show up in relationships. They have you take a relationship inventory. So you write down every single person that you've dated. You write down what you remember about that relationship, just one line, and then why did it end? And you'll get to the bottom real quick of what it is that you're doing that is causing these relationships to end, because you're the common denominator in every single, I swear to God, every single relationship that I listed down ended the same way for me. I ended it, I felt too stifled. It was something was missing from the relationship. And I would just start fights with people. But I think in dealing with my relationship with my parents, some weird shit started turning up. I noticed that I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable around my parents. Physical touch is uncomfortable for all of us. Like hugging is something that I just recently introduced with my family. Well, is there any wonder then that I had problems sexually escalating with women, letting them know that I was attracted to them, flirting with them? Because fucking, I can't be emotionally expressive around my parents. And by the same token, like, whatever triggered me about my mom was definitely whatever triggered me about the women that I was dating. And that was the reason why sets failed, right? That was the reason why I got blown out of the water. It wasn't because these women were doing it. It's because I was emotionally dysregulated because I didn't heal those primary relationships first. And that's really important work. And people don't like doing it because it's like touchy feely and it's got to do with emotions. But it's also like, if you are the age that you're at and you've gone through a good number of relationships and they all keep on blowing up in your face, this is something to really take a look at. It made a huge difference for me.
Yeah, there's the aspect of you can't really run from yourself, and I'm not yet at that belief. I used to way back when I did the whole coaching and dating stuff. I used to say like women can always like the real self of you is always shining through, and women can sense that. I would say I would add the corollary if you're at a nightclub or something. Yeah, she can't necessarily sense that right off the bat, depending on how good you are at acting. But when it comes like longer term dating, uh, all that trauma, all that emotional stuff, it does absolutely come up. And I think it's great because, I've learned a lot from my relationships and it always brings up like, damn it, I gotta work on something else. I thought it was good, or I thought it was like pretty good, right? But I think no matter what, whether if you struggle with connecting with women in one way or another, or you feel like you're not good at dating or long term stuff, usually it does come back to all the scripts that are running your life in terms of how you relate with people intimately. And that usually comes from your family because they were our earliest unit of how to relate to people intimately. And of course, not sexually, but like, on a more personal level. And I really liked your point on the whole like, is it any surprise I feel uncomfortable like expressing myself like sexually with women and escalating if I'm even scared to hug my brother or like my family members. And I think the reason why that also resonated is because like yeah, Asian parents, Asian households were not very touchy feely. And having dated like a lot of Latin women, one of my ex girlfriends, she was telling her mom about how like Asian households are very like not physically affectionate. And the mom's response is like, but how else is the kid really supposed to know that you love them? And of course, like there are other ways of showing love, but I think sometimes Latin culture is like the opposite, where it's like very warm and friendly and like they greet each other with kisses on the cheek and all that stuff. versus like Asian households is very much like, oh, don't touch me, or just like, you know, they might be like, oh, I hugged my parents for the first time in 50 years or 40 years. And it's funny, and at the same time, it's actually like a very real like occurrence, right? Like it has happened. So I think a lot of guys, as you're saying, they're like, God damn it, like I have to like work on my like I have to like heal my relationship with my mom and go to like Landmark. And even when Rob and Jeremy aren't getting like affiliate referrals for going to Landmark, it's like I wish I got referral money. But the point being is like, yeah, there's deep stuff, and that drives our behavior and our mindsets. And oftentimes that impacts how we relate with women. And sometimes I also don't remind myself of it, or sometimes I'm like, oh, no, I worked on myself. But I'm also just like, but have I really, or is it still showing up? Because more recently, I'm like, going to my earlier point, why am I scared of a woman catching me checking her out, especially when she is looking amazing? And, I think it's a reminder for me I still have work to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm talking with one of the women that I'm dating right now. We just had a conversation about like creepiness and where does that come from? Like what situation makes it creepy? Um, and I think to a certain degree, like women are dressing up to be looked at. They want to be appreciated by, well, more for women. I think that was the conclusion that came up.
Yeah.
But if she's in a place where, yeah, sorry for jumping over what you were just saying, but um, if she's in a context where it's supposed to be social, like she's at the bar or at a festival or I can't think of other examples right now. I'm drawing a blank. Something where conversation and socializing is supposed to, like rock climbing gyms are really great because you just sit down, other people are resting in between climbs. Um, and she's dressed up. She wants to be looked at. She's there to engage. But if she's like on the bus and she's got her headphones on and she's dressed up really nice, she's probably going to be a little bit more like volatile and reactive. She doesn't want that attention. And I think that kind of plays into the sense of like, ooh, should I be interacting with her or not? Like, just have conversations with your female friends and they'll let you know what's creepy and what's not. But then there's also the other end of like, oh, where have I been making myself wrong for like looking at women that I'm attracted to? And it can be addressed either way, but I think a combination of the two is valuable.
Yeah, I agree. And, we covered a fair amount in this like hour and 20 minutes that we've had. All really great stuff. I think, even as I was listening to what you were saying, I'm like, man, it's like I knew the concepts, but having you say it has it hit differently. So I'm sure anyone that's listening to this conversation that we had will have a lot of value taken from it when it comes to relating with women. What is the best way for people to work with you, to just connect with you and learn more about like what you have to offer and what you're about?
Sure. I don't generally start off with any offers. I just talk with people to see if we vibe. If it's like if it feels good for me, then we can talk about something if they want. So the best way to reach me is you can find me at facebook.com/RL Wang, WANG, or I think you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Rob Versus. Yeah, so conversation. That's basically it.
Yeah, I'll be sure to link that in this video as well as in the description of this video. But Rob, thanks again for really sharing your insights. I think this just time really flew by because I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm just very glad that you're able to share these insights with guys because if there is a better way of connecting with women. Obviously, I'm still learning and growing with all that stuff, but I mean, you're proof of it, and I want more. I want more men to hear this message instead of feeling like they have to be stuck in this system of like game and like strategies and like constantly having to prove themselves and manage logistics, or basically control the outcome or influence the outcome as much as possible. So I'm just very glad that we were able to hold this talk and disseminate it to everyone else.
Yeah, me too, dude. Thanks for listening to me rant, and I would agree. There's I think game has its time and place, and at least for me, it was a really great stepping stone into something that I feel is a lot more powerful. There's a lot of suffering that comes with game because there's so many expectations about how it should be played. So yeah, if this was helpful at all, I'm grateful for that.